Now, I know what you're thinking. This isn't even the biggest story revolving around the Pittsburgh Penguins that has transpired in the past 24 hours or so. That honor belongs to the headline heading into yesterday's Pittsburgh and Minnesota game, wherein the Pens won 4-3. Obviously, the big story that everybody was talking about heading into that contest was Marc-Andre Fleury, Minnesota Wild goaltender and absentee from this game. He didn't get the start. He didn't play a single second in this game. Filip Gustavsson got the decision through and through. And a lot of people brought up how this was kind of disrespectful. Oh, you're not paying tribute to what could be Marc-Andre Fleury's last game in Pittsburgh. Why not give him the start? The fans were chanting, "We want Fleury," even though it was the opposing goaltender. Like, they were talking about it on the broadcast, but I think that may have been the weirdest, most contextualized quote that a group of people in a crowd could have been cheering, and it was the entire crowd pretty much. "We want Fleury." Literally chanting out that they want the opposing team, the away team, to swap out their backup goaltender in net. Very interesting stuff, but that is not today's topic. Today we're talking about the Pittsburgh Penguins and the idea that we may see ourselves another trade involving one of the top players on this team. To help us out, we're going over onto an article published on Pittsburgh Hockey Now by Dan Kaniewski from 4 days ago, December 15th. Here's the quote from the title of the piece, that in which will be linked in the description. Did Kyle Dubas' comment mean Penguins could trade Letang, Malkin, or Sidney Crosby? Now, you know from the title and the thumbnail, we're not talking about those three, but there were some very interesting comments made by new Pittsburgh Penguins GM Kyle Dubas in regards to the direction and what some of these guys' fates could end up entailing. Take a look at this. The Pittsburgh Penguins have filled the headlines with baffling play and puzzling results. They have dominated a few games and lost, failed to score on the power play for more than a month, and yet their starting goaltender leads the NHL with 3 shutouts. If you can figure out the mysterious Penguins juju and how to get a Hall of Fame-laden team on a consistent track record, Coach Mike Sullivan has operators standing by. There is little doubt that the Penguins must improve, or Penguins President of Hockey Operations and GM Kyle Dubas could wear a black hood and bring a scythe to meetings about future direction. Here's the quote from Kyle Dubas that kind of goes over this entire thing. "I have my expectations of the group now, and I have my responsibility in the long run when it comes to how we're going to dictate our course. I'm going to give the players and the coaching staff as much time as possible," Dubas said. "So I'm just going by the nature, not going to make any decisions based on how we do this week or next week. When we get through the All-Star break, and on the other side of that, we'll have a better idea of what we are as a group and where we need to go. Do we need some help, or do we need to have a deeper discussion about where we're at as a club?" Now pause, before we continue on with this idea, the way Dubas phrases the ending comments in this big quote, do we need some help, or do we need to have a deeper discussion about where we're at as a hockey team? Obviously, it's a lot easier in writing to look at the 3 dots and say, oh, look at that. Kyle Dubas is bringing up 2 possibilities. Either they get a trade done to help them out in the short term, or have a deeper discussion and say, all right, we're just not good anymore, time to ship everybody else off. It's easy to come to those kinds of conclusions, but this is what Dan Kaniewski writes in response to this idea. "In the room that day, I didn't take Dubas' comments as a threat of a potential teardown. I took them as optimistic, and a GM willing to make trades to help the team. But if it does fall flat, recouping assets and moving players to add youth and a fresh start could be in order." Now, this is no surprise. The Penguins' prospect pool, their draft pick pool, it's not been great the past few years. They have one of the worst prospect pools in the entire NHL just because of the lack of quantity they have. So, when it comes to the idea of trading guys away to get some extra younger players, then that actually seems like an acceptable route to go down, doesn't it? And furthermore, if you wanted to talk about where the conversation lies within the players, if you conclude that the Penguins may need to ship some guys off, get some younger assets, maybe not try to compete right now, Dan Kaniewski goes out there and says this: "From this view of the church, it seems like the Penguins could indeed trade Erik Karlsson. He's here to win, and if that's not going to happen, both sides could find a quick and amicable parting. Dubas could surely recoup the first and second round picks the Penguins gave up in the deal, if not more, and even come out ahead. However, next summer is the more likely time frame for that trade because of Carlsson's salary. So, when it comes to the idea of EK65 getting shopped off once again, what Dan Kaniewski is saying here in this article is that it actually may be possible. Erik Karlsson this season has 22 points in 30 Penguins games played, on pace for about 60 on the year with 16 goals and 44 assists. Now that is a steep decline from what he had accomplished last season as a member of the San Jose Sharks, 101 points as a -26 player, winning the the Norris, and being one of the best seasons we have ever seen from a defenseman in the past 3 decades. Surely you could say that with the Penguins' structure, their inefficiency to score on the power play, and the fact that they have Chris Letang also on this team splitting top minutes, it's difficult to really give Carlsson the opportunities to get a 100-point season again. Really, I think the power play was the biggest kicker, considering the fact that Carlsson was on that top unit for a while. It's just the Penguins' power play scored fewer goals than freaking Tristan Jarry did. And when your power play unit is scoring fewer goals than your goalie, then you have a problem there. Just saying. The same article on Pittsburgh Hockey Now talks about the Jake Guentzel conversation, Rickard Rakell, some of these guys, Riley Smith, Ryan Graves. It then talks about the big three, Malkin, Letang, and Crosby. No chance. And part of the reason for that is because of these 3 guys and their enthusiasm to stick around with the Penguins. They knew that losing was a possibility, especially when they re-signed their contracts a year ago. Sidney Crosby is the heart and soul captain of this squad, so he's probably not going to be on the move. But the Erik Karlsson conversation, I mean, there is not as much of an emotional and just overall attachment between Carlsson and Pittsburgh as there is with any of the other 3 guys. So, if you wanted to talk about potential trade candidates, Carlsson could be up on that list if you wanted to consider the Penguins not being all too great. Carlsson went to Pittsburgh because he wants to win. That was one of the stipulations that everybody was talking about when it came to Erik Karlsson destinations. He wants to go to a contender. He wants to play where he can win. He wants to get redemption for not making the Stanley Cup Finals with the Ottawa Senators. He wants to get redemption for not winning the Stanley Cup Finals as a member of the Sharks. If there was a group of guys that could go out there and use his services, then hey, Crosby, Malkin, and Letang. They could go out there at a 4th and tear the roof off with support from guys like Jake Guentzel and Rust and everybody else. But if that's not Pittsburgh anymore, if the Penguins still continue to falter and the, let's say, all-star break passes along and Kyle Dubas determines that this team may need a shakeup, then who knows if Erik Karlsson could find himself on the trade block once again. And if that's the case, then hey, Toronto, man. Like, that's the easy one to fill in, isn't it? The fact that the Maple Leafs and the Penguins have had so many trade conversations over the past few years. Kyle Dubas has the affinity there. There would be a really intriguing perspective if Kyle Dubas decides to trade Erik Karlsson over to Toronto and try to help out his old team in a way. I don't know, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? But obviously I'm just spitting at the top of the dome here. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about the entire idea of another Erik Karlsson trade. Do you think it's possible? Do you think this is actually a thing that's worth talking about? I'll leave a link in the description to the article on Pittsburgh Hockey Now because there actually is a lot of really good insight from Kaniewski in regards to this idea. But if you're a Pens fan, what are your thoughts on the idea of selling some of your guys? What are your thoughts on the idea of your team not being good enough to compete this year? And what repercussions you think need to be taken in order to address that? Is it a trade with Carlsson? Is it a trade with Guentzel? Do you try to ship off one of the big 3? If you're a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, let me know your thoughts in the comment section about this entire idea. Do you think Kyle Dubas could help out his old team? I wasn't initially going to make this video in regards to Toronto and the entire thing there, but yeah, it's a good angle, you know? I feel like I'd be doing myself a disservice if I didn't at least bring it up at the end, but let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about this entire idea. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.